All right, I was asked yesterday about meatloaf, and I actually had a plan to make meatloaf this week, so I decided I would go ahead and make it today. I have here 2 pounds of ground beef. It's all smushed up, so that's why it looks smaller than 2 pounds, but I promise you it's 2 pounds. Half of an onion. I have it very finely diced. I've even seen or thought about shredding it like on a cheese grater, but usually I just cut it up because I'm more interested in keeping my knuckles. I asked Nathan to get me 2 eggs, and this is how he set up my eggs. Boys, what are you gonna do with them? So 2 eggs, and the eggs I usually do a 1-to-1. 1 pound, 1 egg. Makes it easy. Remember, save those shells, use them in your garden. 2 eggs. 1 cup of breadcrumbs. I like breadcrumbs. I have used oatmeal, I have used crushed crackers, but for me, breadcrumbs gives the consistency that I want more than any other thing that I would use. Teaspoon of pepper. Teaspoon of salt. Teaspoon of garlic. We use a lot of garlic in our house. That's why I have the big old thing of garlic. I put garlic on so many things that I'm cooking, it's not even funny. A tablespoon of mustard. You can use more mustard, you can use less mustard. Tablespoon is just what I like, because that's the flavor. I don't want the mustard flavor to be overwhelming. You don't even have to use mustard. You don't like mustard? Don't use mustard. But I think it just adds that little tiny bit of zip. And I have a 1/2 cup of ketchup here. Get every drop of that. And you may notice I'm using a cast iron skillet to make my meatloaf. I'm gonna bake this on 425 in my cast iron skillet because I think a cast iron skillet just does the absolute best job of cooking a meatloaf evenly. It cooks it nice and crispy on the edges. We have had arguments in our family over who gets the crispiest edges, I should say, of the meatloaf, because it just a little extra layer of texture right there. And one of the things that was mentioned about meatloaf, someone said something about it getting all congealed on the bottom. Part of that has to do with what cut of meat, I don't know if you, would you call it cut? Somebody just knocked on the door. Well, before we were interrupted with one of our amazing neighbors returning my adventurous border collie, who apparently got out the gate that someone left open, not naming any names, Nathan Lumley. I was saying it depends on the grind you get. So if you get a 70-30, you're gonna have a lot more fat left in the bottom of your pan. I typically, for burgers and things, like an 80-20, 85-15 hamburger meat, for me, should always be about there. Meatloaf too. There are a couple of ways you can cut down on the grease that's left over. I have, well, using the breadcrumbs helps, but you can actually put pieces of bread, dry bread, stale bread, in the bottom of your pan before you put your meatloaf in it, and that will soak up some of the extra grease. Or you can, as your meatloaf, once it cooks and it shrinks up a little bit, you can put some bread along the sides and let it soak it up that way. Or what I do, I just pick the pan up, tilt it a little bit, pour off some of the grease, and then it's fine. I it depends on how confident you are with your abilities in keeping the meatloaf in the pan. So, putting this nice and neat and evenly in the pan. I know that some people put things like bell peppers and jalapenos and whatever in their meatloaf. You can do that. That's up to you too. I just like a nice meaty meatloaf. If I want vegetables, I'm gonna eat them on the side. Or, hey, open that for me. Thank you. Last thing I'm gonna do, of course I'll put vegetables in soups and stews and things like that. And sometimes in a meat dish, it depends. Sometimes with a roast, I'll put carrots and potatoes. But for meatloaf, I just want mostly meat, some onion, some flavoring. Shepherd's pie, I do put a lot of vegetables in. I made a shepherd's pie baked potatoes not too long ago. Those turned out really, really good. Last bit of ketchup I like to use on the top. Get it in there just enough to spread it out evenly all the way across the top. And then let it bake. If you bake it right, that ketchup will get a nice little dryness to it that just adds an extra layer of flavor. We're gonna bake this on 425. Yes, that's one of my favorite baking temperatures. For about an hour. You just kind of have to watch it and make sure that you're not overdoing it and that you're not underdoing it. Again, that depends on the level of fat that's in your hamburger. So, I will be back when this is done.
Action.
All right, meatloaf is done. Chris, you might want to get a good close-up on that. You can tell it's done. It's actually starting to pull apart a little bit, which is fine. It's still going to be nice and juicy on the inside. These edges right here, remember what I said about those crispy edges? This is what my family fights over. They want the crispiest edge every time we have meatloaf. In case you didn't see my status earlier, it was kind of funny. Nathan said, "You're making meatloaf and squash casserole?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Keep making cooking videos." He said, "I'm going to be fat, but keep making cooking videos." So, that didn't come out very well because of the way I scooped it out. It should have come from the back side of it. But the bottom of it gets a little bit crispy too, and nobody complains about that in this house. So, you can see though, still juicy on the inside. I did pour off a little bit of grease like I mentioned earlier just because it's hamburger meat. If we were grilling these making burgers out of this and grilling it, that grease would fall through. If I was frying in a pan, grease would fall through. You just got to get rid of the grease because hamburger is a fatty meat unless you get like ground round, and who wants that? There's no flavor there. So, try my meatloaf. Let me know what you think.